All right. Welcome to writing a short answer essay question. This is Mr. Gaberline's English classes. I wanted to provide a brief lesson on how to construct a short answer essay question, not just for our class, but because this is a crucial skill beyond academics. This is authentic skills you'll need no matter what career field you go into in life. Being able to construct your ideas in an organized fashion, convey them to others in a way that provides evidence and support to an argument is a very useful skill. So we're going to go step by step on how to do this. Specifically, how to do this with an essay question that is on a test, a quiz, or that is assigned as a writing assignment in a class. Oops, okay. So, this question might look familiar to some of my students who recently took a quiz on Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl. This is the question that we recently were asked and that you recently answered. Let's use this as we begin to embrace the steps of writing a short answer essay. So, the first step that I would encourage you to use is reading the directions and reading the question and breaking them both down. Okay. Why is that important? Well, too often I find that students and adults alike merely skim directions or devote minimal time to a question and then start to answer it. Which leads to important details being left out and the answer not being as successful, complete, or directed as it could be. So here is that prompt you saw on the previous screen. It is color-coded here. Let's see what those codes mean. This is how I've broken it down so that I can understand what I'm being asked to do. I'm identifying what I need to do in order to write a successful answer. While yellow, the portion of the question that's in yellow, tells me that the format that I'm writing in is paragraph format. Not a single sentence, not bullet points, but an actual, fully developed, well-written paragraph. Good. So I know how I need to do this. What do I need to do? Well, green tells me that I need to form an argument about gender roles, and I need to specifically address the character of Mary Maloney. Harmful or helpful to her. Okay, so I know how, in terms of a paragraph, I know what I'm doing, an argument about gender roles, but I also need to look at the fine details of how they want me to support that argument. I need to use evidence from the text. In the case of a test where you don't have the text in front of you, you're probably not going to be quoting the text, but you might be referencing specific scenes or plot points or characters or symbols. If I do have the ability to do a writing assignment where I have the text available, then I'm probably going to be quoting and citing that piece. And in orange here brings up the important component of reading and breaking down the directions and questions so that I address all parts of the question. In this beginning statement, I see words like social context, and I see additional characters like Patrick Maloney mentioned. My answer should probably not just focus on Mary, but should make sure that I address Patrick, and I should make sure that I think about the social context of the 1950s in which Roald Dahl wrote and published this story. What do I do, though, if the question includes multiple parts? So, here is a different question for the epic poem, Beowulf. It is broken down into colors. It is 3 separate questions, including a third question in orange that is quite robust. So what am I doing? Well, I'm breaking it down. You see the highlights above. I'm looking for connections between the questions. If I look at the green and the blue, and I think about this, I know that before Grendel meets Beowulf, the only person or entity that he fears is God. And there are multiple reasons for this, but maybe my argument is that Grendel fears God because Grendel is described as being kin of Cain, and other demons and monsters who were banished and treated harshly by God. Okay, great. I can connect the first and the second question, and that will allow me a little bit of momentum when I get to the third question. So, speaking of the third question, I'm identifying what I need to know. Well, it references the context of the poem when it was written, the society, the Anglo-Saxon society, and if there was a larger purpose behind having Grendel fear God. Well, knowing Anglo-Saxon society and the embrace that they provided to the religion of Christianity, I will probably combine that in my first part of my answer to say that Grendel fears God because not only is the character described as being kin to Cain and other demons, but the larger social context was that the Anglo-Saxon society had converted to Christianity, and the poem was used to spread Christian ideals and messages. Awesome. Now I've got a statement that will address all three parts of the question. Voila, there we go. Fully formed thesis statement. All right. True or false? Pre-writing and evidence is the step where the bulk of my time will be spent when answering an essay question. The answer is true. If you have broken down your question, broken down your directions, this is the step where you start forming those arguments and finding the evidence to support them, and then actually putting it all together down on the page. Writing it is easy compared to this step right here. So, first I'm determining my answer to the question. Well, for our initial question about Lamb of the Slaughter, I'm going to argue that the gender roles of the time period hurt and helped Mary Maloney. How did they do that? Well, here is my thought process and my argument for how it hurt her. That she was dependent, overly dependent on Patrick, her husband, that she almost seemed like a servant to him, and that he was the one that had the control, the power, the freedom in the relationship. And this is emblematic of the time period, the husband-wife dynamics. I'm also going to say that it helped her. It helped her form a credible alibi after she murdered him. It helped her be viewed by the detectives as weak, emotional, as someone who could not be the suspect. And in the end, Mary used that, led the detectives astray to look for the man who was responsible. All right. So, I've got my arguments. Now let's find the evidence to support my answers. Here is evidence to support that Mary was hurt by the gender roles. She is a servant. She waits for him to come home. It is a wonderful time of the day, but she is beholden to him. And then he leaves her. Here is my evidence that shows that the gender roles helped her. After she has killed him, she is now thinking about how she can use those gender roles to create her alibi and trick the detectives who are trying to catch the man who killed him. Okay. So, I have broken down the question, broken down the directions. I've formulated an argument, written that down, and also found evidence to support my argument and any points that I have underneath that argument. Now, I am compiling my answers into an organized paragraph that addresses all parts of the question. You look at this answer here. The yellow portions are the argument, the thesis statement. In the beginning, in Lamb to the Slaughter by Roald Dahl, Mary Maloney is both hurt and helped by the gender roles and norms of the era. Great. So, I've laid it out there. Then, at the end, in yellow, you see it's highlighted in yellow again because I reiterate the gender roles, my statement on them, but I kind of build upon it. I say Mary Maloney uses gender roles to her advantage after being constrained by them for many years in her relationship with Patrick. I'm acknowledging that the roles hurt and helped her. If you look in green, you're going to see some statements that allow evidence to be used. And if you look in blue, you see analysis of that evidence. So, for example, the second line of the paragraph. In the beginning of the story, Mary is shown to be a dutiful wife. And then here is the evidence. Waiting on her husband to come home from work, she merely wanted to satisfy herself that each minute that went by made it nearer the time when he would come home. All right, there's my evidence. Here is my analysis of what I just quoted from the story. After Patrick shares his intention to leave Mary and she responds impulsively and violently by killing him, she benefits from the gender roles and norms of the era. Good. This is analysis that also then connects to the next part of my answer. She makes her presence known in public to help establish her alibi, which she then shares with detectives when they arrive at her home. More evidence. After this evidence, I assert that Mary being viewed as a friend by the detectives meant that they let their guard down, they drank, they ate the lamb, that she prepared for Patrick. It allowed her then to cleverly suggest that they look for the man who killed Patrick and allowed her to use those gender roles to her advantage. There we go. That is the answer. The final step, proofreading. Too often, we do not break down the question, we do not break down the directions, but this is probably the number one thing that gets thrown to the wayside, just merely because we're either exhausted or we don't have enough time. I'm going to challenge you in our class to create the time, to plan ahead so that you can proof your work. This is important. It is a critical step. You want to ask yourself, did I answer all parts of the question? If you've broken down the question and the directions, this should be easy. You also want to ask, did I make a clear argument? You saw how clear that argument was in my example. Mary Maloney was both helped and hurt by the gender roles of the time in Roald Dahl's classic story, Lamb to the Slaughter. Very clear. Does my evidence support my argument? Are there grammatical, punctuation, or spelling errors? Sometimes you can have an excellent argument, but because of some of these errors, your writing obscures the strength of your argument. And finally, I'd say, is my answer in logical order and does it make sense? So it would be easy to give someone directions from Freedom High School to the Panera in South Riding, right? But if I told you to come out of Freedom High School and make a right and go to the four-way stop in South Riding, that would make sense. If you had asked me for directions to Panera, but I started at Panera and worked backwards, it would be a little jarring. It's the same way with an essay. If a question gives you, 3 points to answer, don't start with the third one and work backwards. Work from the first point down. Work chronologically. Okay, so now it's your turn. You have your guided notes. You're going to practice this. Here are your directions. In a well-written paragraph that uses your own opinions and evidence from the text to support your argument, answer the following question. All right, there's your directions. You're going to need to break those down. Here is your questions. Using one of the stories that we have read in this unit, attempt to answer this question. Which is more powerful and why? The loss of innocence as a child/teenager or the loss of innocence as an adult? You have the flowers, you have Scarlet Ibis, you have Lamb to the Slaughter, and you have the Veldt to choose from. Choose wisely, break down the directions, break down the question, pre-write, find your evidence, and write your sample short answer essay. I'm excited to read them. Good luck and happy writing.